Shalom, my name is Joseph Shulam and I'm doing mind candy. Another mind candy. Somebody asked me a few days ago through the internet how to understand Matthew chapter 11 verse 12. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. Okay, it's not an easy text to understand. I agree. And I, several years back, did a lot of thinking and a lot of research on this text. First of all, where does it come from? And the text, the verse prior to that, makes it even more difficult. Yeshua says in chapter 11, verse 11, "Assuredly I say to you, among those born of a woman, there is not risen one greater than John the Baptist. But he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." Wow, it's also a very complicated text. Yeshua says John the Baptist, which was his cousin, 6 months older than he was the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. But anybody that now enters the kingdom of heaven after the advent of the Messiah himself is greater than John the Baptist. That's an interesting paradigm, interesting concept. But verse 12 it makes it even more difficult. I'm going to read again verse 12 and 13 until verse 15. "And from the day of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers from violent men. And the violent men take the kingdom by force. For all the prophets and the law of Moses meaning, prophesied until John. And if you are willing to receive it, he is Elijah who is to come. He who has ears, let him hear." Enigmatic text. Hard to understand. And I read some of the best commentators of the New Testament. The Anchor Bible commentary on Matthew, and the Netivyah commentary on Matthew, and the International Critical Commentary, which is old but great, on Matthew. And I wasn't satisfied with any of their comments. But when I read rabbinical commentators on Micah the prophet, chapter 2, the last verses of chapter 2, I'm going now to Micah the prophet. You can open your Bibles to Micah the prophet if you wish. Micah, Micha in Hebrew, chapter 2, and we're going to read from verse 12. I wish I could read it in Hebrew and you would understand it, but I have to read it in English from the New King James, which is my favorite translation to English. Chapter 2 of Micah, verse 12 and 13. "I will surely assemble all of you, O Jacob. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together in the sheepfold, like a flock in the midst of their pasture. They shall make a loud noise because of so many people. The one who breaks, the bandit, the breaker, the violent person, the one who breaks open will come up before them, and they will break out from their enclosure. Pass through the gate and go out by it. Their king will pass before them, with the Lord marching at their head." Wow, what a text. What a picture. It's compact. It's 2 verses, verse 12 and 13 of chapter 2 of the prophet Micah. But let me deal with the text itself first and then go into the rabbinical interpretation of this text. God will gather Jacob, all of Jacob, all the remnant of Israel, and put them in the sheepfold. Literally, that's what it says. In the sheepfold, in an enclosure. Years ago, when you traveled from Jerusalem to Jericho, or in the Negev desert, you used to see the Bedouin flocks, sometimes thousands of sheep. You should know, you look at the Bedouins living in tents and in tenements and now they're giving up the tents, they're building from tin and from wood and from cardboard and from junk, building small huts instead of the tents that were made from goat hair, black goat hair. They're building more permanent dwellings nowadays. And they have sheepfolds, but they're much smaller than they used to be because they're now doing business. All kinds of business. Good business, bad business, white business, black business, but they're doing business. So they're not riding camels anymore in the Judean hills and the Judean desert. They're riding Subarus and Toyotas, Jeeps, and pickup trucks, four-wheel pickup trucks. But a sheepfold is an enclosure that you bring the sheep after they go into pasture, and they're locked up in the sheepfold. They can't go out. It's like a corral for horses in the Wild West. There's a gate, and the sheepfold is built like a funnel. The flock comes into the funnel, enters through a narrow gate into the fold, and then the gate is closed. So Micah says that God is going to gather Jacob, all of Jacob, all the remnant of Israel, and lock them up in a sheepfold. And it will be very crowded in that sheepfold. Yeah. And they shall be crying, making a loud noise, because of so many people, the English translation. But the breaker, the one who breaks out violently, the Hebrew word is haporetz. Poretz means somebody that comes to break into your house, to break your door, to break the bank safe and rob it. That's what haporetz is, violent men. Will come from among them and go in front of them, and they will break out the doors, the gates that they locked them in, and their king, Jehovah himself, will be at the head of that breakout. That's what Micah says. And I believe that that's what Yeshua is teaching. It's based on this picture of people locked up in a sheepfold, and they can't get out, and their king breaks out. He is violently breaks out the sheepfold gate and lets everybody loose. And he himself is called Jehovah, is at the head of those that break out into the freedom. Now, we're fortunate because we have a lot of rabbinical literature, pretty early rabbinical literature. This piece of literature that I'm going to quote to you is not so early. It's from about the 2nd century AD, maybe the beginning of the 3rd century AD, and it is a kind of commentary on this text of Micah. God had a problem. He has children. Lots of them. And he doesn't know which children follow him because they love him, and which children follow him because they fear him. But he wants to know, who are the people who really love me? So he builds a structure, a sheepfold, a prison, a room, a space, call it whatever you want, that is built 4 by 4. Anytime you have this phrase 4 by 4 in the Bible or in rabbinical literature, Pharisaic rabbinical literature from about 180 BC till about 500 AD, anytime you have this phrase 4 by 4, is not talking about a piece of wood. It is talking about the law. The law is 4 by 4, 4 cubits by 4 cubits. It is a square. And it is an enclosure. The law in any country, any law, state law, federal law, international law, is a boundary. That's the nature of law. It's a boundary. It closes you in. It limits you. You're closed in within the legal system that you didn't decide, unless you're a Supreme Court judge. And in this picture in Micah, the king himself is locked in with his flock, and he has to break out into wide open spaces. In the rabbinical commentary, the king is not locked in the 4 by 4. He is not bound by the law that he gave to the children of Israel. The law, the Torah, was given to men. Yeshua said it. The Sabbath was given for men and not men for the Sabbath. And the Torah limits us. Yes. And the gospel limits us. And the letters of the apostles limit us. That's the nature of law, of legal system. Even if it's based on grace, it's still the nature of it. And so their king built the structure of 4 by 4, and he put all of his servants there, very tight, very crowded, and there is no door, no key. The only thing that there is a small little peephole. That they can look out of the peephole and out in the wide open spaces. I'm quoting to you now the English of the Hebrew text. Out in the wide open spaces, the king is sitting on the throne. The Lord himself, God himself, is sitting on the throne, but he is in the freedom, and they are bound by the law. That's what the text in Micah says. They're bound by the law. They're in the 4 by 4, and they peep out and they see the king outdoors in the wide open spaces. But notice, Micah says that God himself gathered Jacob, all the people, the rest of Israel, and he put them in the sheepfold. He put them in that 4 by 4 room. But those who love God, not only fear him, not only legalistically keep the law, they look out of the window and say, oh, this is not our place here. We want to be out where our God is, where our King is, sitting on the throne in the wide open spaces, in the freedom. That's the Pharisaic rabbinical interpretation of this text of Micah. But according to Micah, who is leading the breakout, the violence? The violent breakout of that 4 by 4 enclosure. Who is leading it? The King himself. Jehovah himself, their King, is leading them. I'm going to read verse 13 again of Micah. The one who breaks open, the violent one, will come up before them. They will break out, pass through the gate, and go out by it. Their King will pass before them with the Lord at their head. The Lord is the Tetragrammaton, Jehovah, will be leading them out of the enclosure into the wide open spaces. The good news, the gospel. God bless all of you. Shalom from Jerusalem.